All right, welcome everyone. This beautiful Thursday. I'm losing track of the days here. Welcome everyone to our hybrid cloud authentication lab, adding Google authentication to Red Hat OpenShift clusters. So a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. So if you would like to go ahead and share where you're joining from in the chat, if you'd like to get to know your fellow techies in the chat as well, feel free to share your name and pronouns, your title and company, or maybe what program you're currently with, where you're from or joining from, and if you'd like to share something you love and a quirk, something that's uniquely weird or different about you. So if you look at the top of the chat, I've shared some links with you. This is the link to the slides. Everything that we're sharing with you today is in the slides, as well as the lab links and labs instructions that we have at the bottom of your screen, the call to action button down there. We also have here, I'm sorry, this is the IBM Cloud sign-up link. Sorry about that. So if you'd like to follow along with the lab today, the only requirement is an IBM Cloud account. You will be signing up for a free light tier account, so you'll have access to over 40 light tier products and services, as well as a bunch of other offerings that we have within the IBM Cloud console as well. So if you want to follow along today, you can go ahead and sign up for an IBM Cloud account or log in if you already have one. This is the link to the slides. Okay. Okay. So again, everything is in the slides. So this is the link to the slides. I've also shared all of these links at the top of the chat as well. And this is the link to the live stream recording. So if you want to follow along later or share with your friends, or maybe watch and follow along on your own a little bit later on, the live stream recording that the URL that you joined the live stream recording with today is where the recording will live. So the hybrid cloud link you joined with, you'll be able to access the recording there after. It's not going to disappear after any point in time. So I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I'll pass things over to my teammate Dave here, and he'll start to guide you on our journey. So my name is Jenna. I'm a cloud developer advocate with IBM. I'm really into workshops. I really like a great tutorial. You know, I teach it to, tell it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. I like step-by-step so that if something pops up that you're not expecting, that's okay. You don't need to worry about it. And feel free to connect with me on social. On all social, I'm at Ritten. You can also I'm work with the Call for Code Zero Hunger team. So if you need to book some time with me to get some help, you can access my Calendly from my Linktree account. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently joining from Detroit, which is where I'm from. We're all one North America happy family team now, so we're all kind of spread out. And a quirk about me is I judge restaurants based on how well they make a tuna salad sandwich or a tuna melt. I feel like if you're going to get lazy with it, I don't really want to try any of the other food on your menu. So that's a little bit about me. I'll pass things over to Dave so he can get you started on our wonderful OpenShift journey this morning.
Ooh, I love it. So I think there's a slide about me on your deck, Jenna. The next one, maybe? Oh, yes, I edited it correctly. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Nugent. I'm sure you've seen me and Jenna at previous Crowdcasts, but as she mentioned, we're both on the North America team here at IBM. And we're going to walk through a pretty involved lab. It's going to involve a lot of copying and pasting and integration and stuff like that. Personally, I'm more of a JavaScript and Kubernetes person, and also I love donuts. This is like my total weakness. Weakness or superpower, I'm not sure. Maybe both. So yeah, as Jenna mentioned, this is all recorded today, and it'll be accessible at this URL immediately after the workshop concludes. One of the really cool things about this workshop today is that we're actually going to be assigning each of you a completely free Kubernetes cluster running Red Hat OpenShift. So these are really, really powerful and quite expensive clusters that you're going to get access to. And then I've also collected a bunch of the links that we're going to be using inside this little dev.to post, which I will share here in the chat. And so basically, I'm going to be walking through sort of like a 5 or 10 minute overview of Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift, why they're useful, why they're important. And then we're going to jump into creating your IBM Cloud account and grabbing your Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift cluster. So if you want to get started ahead of time, the links are in that blog post. The first thing that you'll do is you'll actually create your IBM Cloud account here. And then the second thing that you'll do is to assign yourself a Red Hat OpenShift cluster. And actually, you know what? Let's cover that right now, just so that you can get started with that now. And then we'll jump into what Kubernetes and OpenShift are and why they're important. But I want to make sure that everybody gets their cluster assigned and we get any issues with that taken care of right away. So let me see if I can share my screen here. All right, looks good. And then Jenna, can you promote my screen to be a little bit bigger?
Oh yeah, let me, there you go.
Sweet. Okay, so it looks like I'm still big compared to the screen. Can you make this? Can you make the screen bigger? I know people love to look at my face, but I'm sure that they'd rather see this. Yeah, awesome. So
Okay.
this is the link that was shared in the chat. So you've got your IBM Cloud account link here, and then you're going to visit this URL to get your Red Hat OpenShift cluster after you've created your IBM Cloud account. So you'll create your account. It requires a username, an email address, and then it will give you this free light account. But the nice part is that you won't actually need to provide a credit card as of today. That may change soon, so enjoy your free account. And then what you're going to do is you're going to grab your Kubernetes cluster running Red Hat OpenShift. And so to do that, you're going to go to this little page that we've provided. The lab key is OS Lab. And then your IBM ID is basically just going to be the email address that you use to create your IBM Cloud account. And so this is how we're going to tie your free cluster to your account. So mine is, and you have to agree to the terms and conditions, which you will definitely read, and then you'll hit submit. And what it'll do is it will assign a cluster and create an invite to our advocacy account. But in order to actually activate that invite, you have to accept it. And to do that, you have to go back to your IBM Cloud account. And what you'll see is up here in the notifications icon up here in the upper right, you should see an invite. So let's just click on that. Probably this will be a bunch of extraneous stuff, so I apologize in advance. Yes, and so you'll see this. You are invited to join an account in IBM Cloud, and then you will want to click this Join Now link right here. They'll also send you an email saying you're invited to join an account in IBM Cloud, and you're welcome to click the link in the email if you prefer. I just like clicking the one in the notification section because it's easier. Once you accept the invite, you'll notice that you'll see an additional account up here. So this little drop-down menu is how you switch between different accounts. And so you'll see your one with your name, and then you'll see one with a bunch of numbers, and then I'll say AdvoWork. And that's how we're going to assign a particular cluster to you. So if you switch to that account, and I already have, then when you click on IBM Cloud in the upper left, that's kind of how you get home back to your dashboard. You will see your cluster assigned to you. So I know that was a little bit maybe confusing, a little bit convoluted. All the steps are here in the blog post that I shared. So feel free to work through those. As long as you're able to see the cluster at the end here under cloud.ibm.com/resources, then you did good. You're in a good spot, and Jenna will be able to take it from there when she takes over the lab in a few minutes. If you run into any issues with any part, if some of the instructions aren't clear, please feel free to post in the chat, either post in the ask a question section down there at the bottom, or just in the chat and say, hey, this isn't working for me. This, didn't work the way I expected, and either Jenna or I will be able to help you. And I promise we won't make fun of you, or at least I speak for myself. Maybe Jenna will make fun of you. No, I'm just kidding. So with that, let me finish that part and jump into the introduction to Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift. All right, so Jenna, can you see my slide?
Yes.
Hey, love it. Oh my gosh. A technical victory. We have to celebrate the small victories. So you may have heard that Red Hat and IBM merged. Red Hat is still operating as a completely separate business unit inside IBM. But ever since then, IBM has been really, we've been really gung-ho about promoting Red Hat products and services. And one of the ones that we've been particularly focused on is Red Hat OpenShift, which is interesting because you can actually run Red Hat OpenShift on any cloud. It doesn't have to be IBM. It could be on Azure. It could be on AWS. It could be GCP. It could be your own private cloud. So it's really very flexible and very independent from IBM, which is why it's pretty cool that we're allowed to give you free clusters and talk about it and talk about the value that it brings to enterprises. But taking a step back, I wanted to talk about why containers are actually useful. Now, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this because containers are really sort of the de facto standard these days with deploying applications. But just to take a step back down memory lane, traditionally, applications were deployed directly onto operating systems running on hardware. There was a step in between where virtualized deployment became pretty popular, but you can see that tends to be less efficient than containerized deployment. On the right, you've got a hypervisor, and then on top of the hypervisor, you're running multiple virtual machines, each with their own guest operating system. By comparison, containerized deployment is a lot more flexible, streamlined, and efficient because you have all of these applications and binaries running in lightweight containers running on top of a container runtime. So there's less duplication and competition for operating system and hardware resources on whatever system you're deploying it to. The containers provide a lot of different benefits. One of the ones that I want to focus on, since we're sort of want to get to the lab as soon as possible, is the separation of concerns between developers and operations. So developers and operations each care about different things. Developers are probably going to be focused on the code and the libraries. Operations want to make sure that the network and logging and remote access and monitoring is configured correctly. And containers provide sort of a framework for each of these teams to work with the application to make it resilient from their perspective. Containers provide an agile capability, continuous deployment, separation of concerns like we just talked about, observability, consistency, management. They work really well with microservices, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. Resource isolation, so you get predictable application performance, and resource utilization, so you get high efficiency and density. So just skipping ahead to microservices, this is something that we'll be talking about briefly in this lab as well. This is a definition of microservices. You'll see this in the slides when they're posted, but this is from Martin Fowler's blog post in 2014 that popularized the term microservices, where he says the microservice architectural style is an approach to developing a single application as a suite of small services, each running in its own process and communicating with lightweight mechanisms like an HTTP resource API. And just to visualize how you would break down a monolithic application into microservices, you could see that after you create all these microservices, you could actually use cloud infrastructure to make each microservice high availability and then duplicate those HA microservices across different regions to protect against outages and make them more resilient. But even when you create, let's say, a best-in-breed microservice application that's running on a containerized deployment infrastructure, you're going to run into some bottlenecks from a sort of like team perspective, right? How do you deal with all of these containers running in real time? And that's where the need for orchestration comes in. So orchestration deals with scheduling, cluster management, service discovery, provisioning all those containers, monitoring them, and then also monitoring the configuration of your cluster. And that's where Kubernetes comes into play. So Kubernetes was an open source project, still is an open source project, but it originated from Google. They open sourced it back in 2014, and it built upon all the experience that Google had running production workloads at scale. And now it includes best of breed ideas from the community, including from companies like IBM. So Kubernetes is this really huge, rapidly growing ecosystem. In addition to Kubernetes, there's all of these different companies that offer services, support, and tools. And let me show you what it looks like. And so this is an overview of the Kubernetes architecture. You see at the middle of the diagram, we have our Kubernetes master. And our Kubernetes master is going to deal with all of the different nodes that we have. And it's going to pull containers, container data from an image registry. This could be a public registry like Docker Hub. It could be a private registry. Red Hat OpenShift ships with its own registry. And then we are going to be communicating with the Kubernetes master through an API. And that API could be exposed a few different ways. One way is through a user interface. So we'll actually walk you through Red Hat OpenShift user interface, which is one way that you can manage Kubernetes, or you could manage it through a CLI. And so many people are probably familiar with kubectl. There's also a Red Hat OpenShift command line interface client that you could use to manage a lot of the things that kubectl allows you to do. But talking about why Kubernetes is useful, it's a lot of the pain points that we were having with just a containerized deployment methodology. So it deals with service discovery. It can expose a container using DNS or its IP address. If traffic is high, it's able to load balance and distribute network traffic. Storage orchestration, so it lets you automatically mount a storage system of your choice. Rollouts and rollbacks, so you describe the desired state for your deployed containers using Kubernetes, and it can change the actual state at a controlled rate to match your desired state. Get automatic bin packing, self-healing, so it'll restart containers that fail and replace containers, kill containers that don't respond to your health check, and secret and configuration management. but it doesn't do everything. It doesn't define your application types. It doesn't tell you these are the only types of applications you can run. It doesn't deploy your code, doesn't build your application. It doesn't provide application level services like middleware, data processing frameworks, databases, none of that. It doesn't do logging, monitoring, or alerting. It provides some integrations as a proof of concept. It doesn't do configuration, so configuration language or system like JSON.NET. It provides a declarative API, but it doesn't actually require that you use one. It doesn't do configuration or machine management. But it's not a failing of Kubernetes. It's just this project wasn't designed to do absolutely everything. It was just designed to fill a very useful but very specific purpose. But that opening is where Red Hat OpenShift provides a lot of value. So this is our Red Hat OpenShift diagram. And you could see that as a core part of this, we have Kubernetes right there in the middle running on RHEL. And you can see at the bottom, it actually runs, like I mentioned earlier, on any infrastructure. I talked a little bit about the public clouds on the bottom right. So IBM Cloud, AWS, Azure. I think Google has a cloud also. But you could also run it on a private cloud. You could run it on a virtual server if you wanted to, if you still have virtualized infrastructure. You could run it on a physical server. You could run it on your own laptop. In our case, we're going to be running it on a few nodes on IBM Cloud. But again, Red Hat OpenShift is very, very much infrastructure independent. And then on top of Kubernetes, we have automated operations and a lot of the things that we were talking about that IT and developers need, but that aren't provided out of the box by Kubernetes. So it has an opinion, Red Hat OpenShift has an opinionated stack that includes cluster services, application services, service meshes like Istio, and developer services. And this is where we see our developer tools, our CI/CD pipelines, and everything like that. So I won't go into too much about Red Hat OpenShift 4, but I'll say that the difference between Kubernetes and OpenShift is that Kubernetes is an open source project, whereas Red Hat OpenShift is a product, which is another reason that it's so cool that you're getting free access to it today. OpenShift provides additional security, management, validated integrations, Red Hat's famous support, and their catalog. And so with that, I think I am done talking about OpenShift and Kubernetes. I'm going to open it to see if there are any questions. And if not, then I think that we can get right into the lab. So any questions from anybody about either Kubernetes, OpenShift, or these steps? Was everybody able to create their own account if they didn't already have one and get their Kubernetes and OpenShift cluster assigned to them? And by the way, if you don't want to do that part, if you just want to listen in and watch the lab, that is totally fine. You do not have to assign yourself a cluster, but it's a pretty nice opportunity if you choose to do so. And while I'm waiting for questions, I wanted to show this thing that I saw on Twitter. See this? This is TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. I think this is pretty valid. And also, somebody from Twitter replied to this tweet and said, honestly, this is the nicest thing anyone could ever say about where I work. So Lara really likes the idea that Bill Murray represents her company.
Nice. Okay,
Jenna, I think the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, so I have a lot of resources that you guys can check out in the slides. I don't want to spend too much time. But what we're going to be using today to add authentication to our application is our IBM Cloud App ID service. So, sorry. So IBM Cloud App ID handles authentication and authorization, user profiles, user management. You can add different types of user profiles and add access for users. And essentially, it's identity as a managed service. So just a few features of App ID. So the first one, authentication. So this just means that the user can sign in and sign up for your mobile and web applications. They can authorize access to your backend resources and APIs on any cloud service. And you can use the identity provider, which includes enterprise, social, proprietary, or App ID has a scalable registry as well, called Cloud Directory. So with Cloud Directory, you can add additional security with multi-factor authentication, and you can also authenticate applications rather than the users themselves. A few things that we'll take a peek at is another feature is profiles, so you can build custom app experiences for your users depending on how much access you want to give them, what type of profile you're going to give them. There's user management, so you can scale, use the Cloud Directory to scale your user registry for your applications so that users can sign up and sign in with an email and password, and they can manage their own accounts through their self-service flows, like resetting their password in case they forget it. And the last feature is managed service. So you don't have to worry about setting up infrastructure for identity, ensuring geo-availability, compliance, or availability. App ID is integrated with IBM Cloud, with IBM Cloud Kubernetes service, Cloud Functions, Activity Tracker, and a whole bunch of other things, so that it's really easy and seamless to embed identity into your applications. So I want to go ahead and get started. Yeah, so I have lots of cool stuff here for you guys. Okay, so brief intro of the lab. There we go. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to just be exploring modern user and microservice security. So in this lab, you're going to be able to clone a web app create a web app that provides user interface through the web browser. It's going to leverage external authentication services based on IBM Cloud App ID, our OpenID Connect services. So specifically, our web app is going to use our OIDC authentication grant type. So we're going to be using a Java microservice. We're going to implement backend for frontend pattern, and the backend for frontend and OIDC frameworks. We're also going to use the backend for frontend microservice is packaged as a container, and it's leveraging Eclipse JCube, which has an automatic source to image, and it's deployed to Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud. So our Java microservice, it just returns a simple message. What we're really going to be focusing on is adding that authentication. Now, you can follow the slides step by step. We're going to do this live, but basically, you know, the only prerequisites you need for the lab is an IBM Cloud user ID. So since you all have your since you all have your clusters ready. So the first thing I'm going to do is I just want to show you where to access a few things because we're going to need them later. So you went here to your notifications and you accepted your invitation, right? So the next thing we're going to do is, like Dave showed you, make sure you're in your AdvoWork account. So when you click on your AdvoWork account, you'll see your dashboard. And you should have your cluster here. So here's my cluster. And I just want to show you where we're going to need this information as we work through the lab at a certain point. So I like to just keep it over in another tab. So if you click on your cluster, and you can either open the OpenShift web console or you can click connect via CLI. And if you open the OpenShift console, right from here, from this message, Well, it's still loading. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy our login command. So here is, zoom in a little bit. Okay, so if you click on your email, your IM in the corner, and you click copy login command, it says display token, you can click display token. Okay, so it says log in with this token. So this is what we're going to use to log into our cluster. Okay, so we're going to need this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our regular, go to your regular account, your personal IBM Cloud account. Make sure you're in here. And then what we're going to do is we are going to search for App ID. So the first thing we're going to do is configure everything with App ID, get our authentication integrations ready to go. Well, actually, I didn't delete this, but that's okay. Okay, so you're going to need to create an App ID instance if you don't already. So let me just go to App ID. Okay, so you shouldn't need to do anything here. The free light tier is already selected. So I'm just going to click that, give it a name. And then, so I already had, it gives me this error here. You can only have one light instance. But if it's a new account, what you'll do is click create. And then you will be taken here. Okay, so it says, welcome to the App ID service. I'm going to close that. Okay, so we've created a new App ID instance, and now we're here. Now, the first thing that we're going to do, oops, there we go. All right, is manage our identity providers. So what we're going to do is click on Manage Authentication. As you can see here, we have our identity providers. So we're going to leave our cloud directory enabled. This allows us to host our own user registry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to enable Google. As you can see here, it says you are using App ID default configuration. So that's all we're going to do here. So make sure you have this enabled, and everything else disabled. Okay. And then the next thing we're going to do is configure our app for Google Auth. So if you click edit here, okay. And as you can see here, all we need is a client ID and a secret. It gives us a redirect URL for the developer console. We are going to need to add this to get our client ID and secret, but we'll be able to do that in just a second. So if you go ahead and click the Google Developer Console, it's going to take us over here. Just get rid of this, delete. No, that's not what I wanted. Dashboard. Okay, so the first thing, so the first thing you're going to need to do is if you click up here, you can create a new project. I have this IBM App ID project. So the first thing you're going to do is create a new project. It's going to be OpenShift App ID. And then your organization will be pre-populated, so you don't need to do anything there. And then if you click Browse here, it just has it has this self-created folder. I'm not exactly sure. So I'm using edu email. This is usually what I use. So it just created a self-created folder within the org. So I'm going to click create. Okay. And then let's select my project. Okay, so now I'm in my project. I'm going to click on credentials. Now, as you can see here, I haven't created any credentials here. So it says we need to configure the OAuth consent screen. Let me zoom this in a little so it's easier to see. There we go. So you're going to click configure consent screen. And this really confused me the first time, so we're going to do this together. I'm just going to click external. So I'm going to just say that, you know, any test user with a Google account can do this because I'm using a UMesh email. So I'm just saying anyone with a Google email can use my app. I'm going to click create. I'm going to give the app a name and say OpenShift App ID. I'm just going to select my email for user support email. And then we don't need to do anything else here. Developer, it wants the developer contact information, so I'm just going to add my email. Now it's asking for scopes. We don't need to do anything here. So we'll just save and continue. It's asking for test users. We don't need to do that here either. We're going to create a test user in the App ID console, so we'll just save and continue. And then here's the OAuth consent screen. Okay, and we're going to just select back to dashboard. Perfect. So here is our OpenShift App ID consent. So the next thing I'm going to do, we're in our OpenShift App ID project, OpenShift App ID consent screen. I'm going to click credentials, and you're going to click create credentials right here. And then you're going to click the OAuth client ID. Or not. Okay, so for application type, we're going to select web application. I'm going to just call it same thing, OpenShift App ID, just so I know what belongs to what. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is this add JavaScript origins. So this is the HTTP origin that is hosting our web application. It can't contain wildcards or paths, but we can use a port other than 80. So for example, 8080. So what we're, oops. Sorry about that. Let me start again. This is web app OpenShift ID. Okay, we're going to add a URI. Now this is where we're going to go back to our cloud, IBM Cloud App ID dashboard. Remember that URL I told you to keep in mind? So what we're going to do is we're going to copy up until cloud.ibm.com. This is going to be our JavaScript origins. We're going to add this here. Now we've added that, and then we're going to click create. And now we have our client ID and our secret. So we're going to copy our client ID. We're going to add it right here. We're going to copy our client secret, add it here. I can't get rid of this. And this is in our App ID Google identity providers. So within our managed authentication under Google, we're adding our, stop moving for a second. We're adding our client ID that we're getting from here. And then we're adding our client secret that we're getting from here. And these are our Google Auth client key and secret. And then again, we used our redirect URL here, and we added it as a JavaScript origin in that create credentials. Okay, so we're going to save this. Okay, perfect. And then let's see, the next thing we're going to do is update our cloud directory settings. So we're going to go to cloud directory. So within our managed authentication, we're going to go to our cloud directory. We're going to click on settings. Oh, I already have a user. Get rid of this. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go to our cloud directory, our settings. And what we want to do here is we're selecting allowing users to sign up and sign in with a username and password. Allow users to sign up to your app. For what we're doing today, we're going to say no because we don't have a sign up page. But we are going to let them manage their account from the app so they can use authentication. And what we're going to do for our cloud directory is so that we can sign in with our cloud directory is we're going to create a user. So we're going to scroll down to users and we're going to create a user. And you can put anything here. I'm going to put first name test, last name user, test user at email.com. Oh, oops, that's a username. So username is going to just be test user, and then password, just going to give it a password. Okay. I'm going to click save. I'll just check back here, make sure everything's good. Okay. So we have our test user now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new web application. So we're going to click applications down at the bottom here under login customization, applications. Again, let me delete this so we have a fresh one. Just make sure. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure I was in the right account. So we're going to click add application. And then I have in the directions here, because we're following some specific guide here. So in the slides, as you follow along, all of the commands that I'm going to enter are in the slide. So it's with the slide corresponding to where you need to be and what you need to be doing. So we're going to enter this GM4 cap mod app. And we're going to select regular web application, which is already a default selection here. So go ahead and enter that. And then we're going to click save. And now, as you can see here, we're going to expand the app we just created. And as you can see here, we have our client ID, our secret, our Auth Server URL, and a bunch of other stuff. We're going to use these client ID, secret, Auth Server URL to add to our OpenShift application. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click, if you go to the top here, it says IBM Cloud Shell. It's this little box with a little arrow. We're going to click here. Now to get around having to do all of the local setup on your device, we're going to use the Cloud Shell today. I do have some local setup dev stuff in the slides a little earlier for you. But to get around having to deal with any local issues, we're just going to use our Cloud Shell. So the only thing you're going to need to do here is just type IBM Cloud, all one word, push enter. And now you're able to use the IBM Cloud CLI, the OpenShift Cluster CLI, all the things, all the extensions. So you don't need to worry about installing them locally. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to log into our OpenShift cluster. So remember that tab we had open? There we go. Log in with this token. So the first thing we're going to do is log into our OpenShift cluster. Add this here. Okay. As you can see here, we're logged into our cluster. And then we want to validate our access. And again, all of this is in the slides. So where there's a screenshot of the Cloud Shell showing what to enter, you can copy and paste the commands from the slide comments. So we just copy and pasted our login from our OpenShift cluster token screen. Next thing we're going to type in is OC get nodes. We just want to validate that we have access to our cluster by viewing our nodes. Okay. And the status is ready, so we have access and things are good to go. Now the next thing we're going to do is set up create a project namespace. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to type OC new project, and we're going to create a namespace called Cloud Friendly Security. So go ahead and type that, and then you can push enter. All right, cool. So now we're using this project Cloud Friendly Security on this server. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to clone the repository that we're using. So you can, again, copy the command from the slide that says clone the Git repo. And there we go. So we've logged in and CD'd into the project. Let's do this. And again, the commands are both on the slides that tell you what step it is, as well as the screenshot of what it should look like. So we've cloned into our project. I'm going to move this up here. Zoom in a little, make it a little bigger. Okay. See how everybody's doing. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy an appid.env file. So I'm going to run cp template appid.env into this gm4 capmod app.env file that I have here. And as you can see, it matches our app that we created in our app ID console. So I'm going to click enter. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is clone the repo. We want to edit this app.env file. So this is where we're going to be entering those credentials. So again, make sure you have your credentials open and ready. Actually, let me move this page over. There we go. Just be a little easier to get to. So the command I'm going to run is nano and then just the name of this env file here. I'm going to push enter. Now here's where I'm going to add my client ID, my client secret, and the Auth Server URL that we took a peek at. So I'm going to Erase the filler text there. I'm going to go here. I'm going to copy the client ID without the quotation marks. I'm going to copy just the ID without the quotation marks. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to down arrow because you can't click in here. So you're going to down arrow so you can get to the next line. You're going to delete here. And you're going to copy your client secret. So make sure you don't copy the tenant ID. We want the secret. So it's the third item down. And again, we're going to copy the secret without any quotes. Okay. And then down arrow. And then the last thing we're going to add is this Auth Server URL. So we're going to go here. A little long. So I'm just going to go over like this, make sure I get to the end of it. Okay. And again, I'm going to copy this whole OAuth server URL without the quotes. Paste it here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do, you can see the commands at the bottom here. I'm going to do Control X. And as you can see here, it says save, modified, buffer. Answering no will discard changes. So we just want to give it a capital Y, yes. And then it says file name to write. We're just going to click enter. Okay, so now our app.env file is updated. And again, I have screenshots for everything so you can take a look as well as the commands. Now, what we're going to do is, okay, so the next thing we're going to do is create our app secret on OpenShift. So just 1 second. Move this down. This down. Oops, move this down. Move this down more. Okay. Let me just fix this real quick. All right, so we're going to create secret OpenShift. Okay, so we're going to create secret on OpenShift. So we're going to run this command here. This OC creates secret generic, our app, and then from env file, push enter. Our secret app, our app secret has been created, and then we just want to validate. So validate, to do that, we're going to say OC describe secret. Cool. Good to go. And then now we're going to deploy our resource microservice. So I have the architecture and all the pieces here that fortunately we don't have time to deep dive in today. But what we're going to be doing is we are going to be deploying our resource microservice. So our backend for frontend microservice is going to validate our pseudo token and pass our OIDC access token to the microservice. And then the microservice is going to validate our token via JSON web key set and or our OIDC provider API. And then our microservice is going to return the response. So that's what we're setting up here, deploying our resource microservice. So in order to do that, we're going to build and deploy our resource-ms microservice to OpenShift. So I'm going to run this command. Again, it's in the slides here. And this can take a minute or two. So don't worry if you're like, oh my God, my computer's going crazy. It's doing the thing. So what this is doing is this is creating our OpenShift resource descriptors, building our microservice, and starting the source to image build. And then it's going to deploy our microservice to our OpenShift cluster. It can take up to 2 minutes, so we're just going to let it do its thing. Don't want to disturb it or make it angry. So I'll just let it go. Like Elsa says. And then let's see. So essentially what we're doing here is we are this. Okay. So first we are, oh, it's almost done. Okay. So first we are deploying our resource microservice. It's almost done. And then we're going to deploy our backend for front-end microservice. And then we're going to deploy our UI application. That's going to give us our simple greeting, and we'll be able to log in with our authentication. So just wait for this to finish. While this is finishing, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And once this is finished building and deploying, there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to confirm that the pod is running. So I'm going to run this OC get pods command. And as you can see here, it says that it's running at the bottom. So the next thing I'm going to do, let's see here. Right. And then the next thing I'm going to do is deploy the backend for front-end microservice. So I'm going to run this command here. And it's going to take just a minute. So I'll let that run. And then all we're going to do is confirm that our pod is running. Once this is finished. Okay, should be almost done in just a second.
So we did have a really good question from Paris in the chat asking about, is this something that's production ready? And I just wanted to highlight it to anybody who might not be paying attention to the chat. So everything in this lab is already being used in production by lots and lots of enterprise companies at scale. And the only part would be that the particular application or microservice that you're deploying would be your own microservice and not the one from the GitHub. But everything else, this is exactly how you would do it in production at scale.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. So we just want to confirm that our pod is running. So I'm just going to copy this here. A modern BFF. Okay, and our pod is in fact running. Okay. And then the next thing we're going to do is we've deployed our resource microservice, our BFF microservice. Now we're going to deploy our UI application. So we're going to build and deploy that. So I'm going to run this command here and wait for this to finish. And then we're just going to confirm that our pods are running. Okay, should be finishing up there. Oh, okay. Should be finishing up. Okay. And say no. Oops. No. Should be finishing up here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to configure our UI microservice OIDC and validate our app security. So first thing we're going to do is retrieve our BFF and the UI external routes as variables. Let's see, let's finish up here. Almost done. Let's finish up this thing. So right. It's taking longer than usual. There we go. Oh, my internet's like struggling. Well, it is around lunchtime. Everyone's probably eating up all the bandwidth. All right. I don't know. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to update the modern UI web application. I'm going to validate. Okay. Update the modern BFF microservice environment variables. Okay. And then I need to validate the updated modern BFF microservice redirect URI. Oh no. Let me see if I can run this. Oh no. So, shoot.
Well, on the plus side, even if you reestablish the session, all of the stuff that you've done with your cluster will be preserved.
Will if I reconnect?
Yeah, I mean, like all the stuff that you've been running with OC setenv and everything, that's remote. So even if you restart the Cloud Shell, you should still, like all that stuff should have been done. You'll just need to re-authenticate. Or actually maybe it'll even keep that going.
Yeah, let's see.
Fingers crossed, everybody.
It's okay. The demo gods like to test me every now and then.
Jenna was just telling me earlier today that every demo that she ever does goes perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally
I
said
was
that.
like, Jenna, don't say that. And she was like, it's always perfect, Dave. Don't even worry. Nothing goes wrong. Or maybe it was reversed. Maybe Jenna told me not to say that. It could have, I can't remember at this point.
So basically, I just need to log into my cluster again. Is that what we're?
Yeah, I mean, you might not even need to.
Okay, let me see
If
if
you
I
want to
can.
do like OC get pods, maybe it'll actually already be connected. Sometimes it keeps the state. Nope, got to re-authenticate.
Okay, that's okay. Let's do this.
You got some positive reinforcement from MP Welch, who says anyone can present slides. It takes a real presenter to go live. Thank you, MP.
Ah, famous last words. Okay. So I've accessed my cluster. Let me see if I can. I need to get into my project though.
Yeah.
So, Dave, why don't you walk me through that?
Oh, good question. I will Google that.
Okay. Because I probably need to get into my project again. Maybe. All right.
So if you do OC projects.
OC projects.
Oh, you got a lot.
Whoa, these are not.
But if you do OC project,
I want this one.
Space cloud friendly security, then
Okay.
yeah. So OC project and then that, it should switch to that project.
Oops.
And just to everybody in the chat who was saying, next time stop Jenna from jinxing herself. It was actually the opposite. She was like, "Don't jinx it, David. Don't jinx it." And I was like, "Oh, it's gonna be great, Jenna."
Is it project or projects cloud and then the name?
Project singular.
Okay. Yay!
Ooh.
Okay, so in theory, I already deployed everything. Why? Oh, that didn't work. Why didn't that? Didn't, oh, JK.
Now you may not have the Git clone onto your local machine. Did you already deploy it to OpenShift?
I did.
Okay, so then you probably don't need it locally.
Okay, but I can't get my. I need my login route. No. Oh, how do I should be able to see apps in here, right?
Yeah, as long as it's through OC. Everything through OC will have been preserved, but none of your like local stuff in the Cloud Shell will be preserved. So when you did a Git clone, that stuff got erased. But if you deployed that to OpenShift already, then that will have worked properly.
Yeah, I should just, everything should be deployed. Is there a way to see? Yeah, because I deployed the 3 microservices and I configured everything. I just need to display the external route.
Oh, so OC get routes?
Let's see, get routes.
Ooh.
Ooh, look.
That looks
good.
Look.
You saved the day. Yay.
Woo.
Okay. So I need the modern BFF. Here we go. This. Dokily. Okay. And then what we're going to do, modern BFF. Yeah, this is what we need. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. Our login route. Let me see. Yeah, because that's the load. Okay, so this should be our login route. Let me just make sure. External routes. Okay, so these are external routes. I need the login route. Oh, wait, hold on. I can do this. I think there's a command.
Is there a, is it the login to the application, to the microservice application?
Oh, it looks like, okay, so I set it. So this is the BFF login route. Get route. Okay, this is it. OC get route. Oh. Oh, I know. Okay, so this is what we need to do. Okay, so I'm going to set this environment variable again for our modern BFF. So if you go back to step 1 here.
Step 1? That was like an hour and a half ago.
No.
Just kidding.
So where we're configuring our UI microservices, OIDC, yada yada. So step 1 is retrieve the BFF and the UI external routes as environment variables. So the last one. So as you can see, we have our modern BFF route. Okay, so I'm gonna just retrieve these again. Let me see if this will work. Maybe not. Maybe not. Let's see. All right, let's try this. Let me just set these environment. I'm just going to walk through this last configuring
so
part
you're setting
again.
the environment variables in the Cloud Shell.
Yeah, because I think this is what got deleted.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Let's see. Just going to run through this again. Okay. Update. So just the last part, the configuring part, I'm just going through these setting environment variables again.
So, and Paris has a really good point, which is, could we not also see everything in the web dashboard too? Yeah, we could. What we're basically trying to do is to get back on track with the lab so that we can complete the lab using the same instructions. If we switch to the web dashboard, then we, it would be a different set of instructions. But that's a really good point. When we previously talked about the Kubernetes master and interacting with it through the UI or the CLI, in this lab, we're doing everything through the CLI. But all of this stuff that we're doing, you could also do through the user interface, which you all also have access to through your cluster. You'll see at the top of the cluster page, there's sort of like a launch OpenShift UI blue button. And so you'll be able to walk through that too. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. Okay, so I just ran through those configuration steps. I think there's 4. And 5 is display and copy the BFF login route. So as you can see here, this echo modern BFF login route, and this popped up because I reset my environment variable. So I'm just going to copy this. Now, last step, we're going to go back to our App ID dashboard. We're going to go to Manage Authentication. And we're going to click over to our authentication settings. And it says add web redirect URLs. So I'm going to add this here. And this is what I just copied from the Cloud Shell, this modern BFF login route. So I'm going to add this here. Click enter. Cool. Now we've added this web redirect URL. Now, we should be able to paste our UI external route that we just, this one that we just added. So I'm going to go here, add it here. Yay!
Ooh.
Somebody give me a cookie, you know? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm feeling pretty good.
I love it.
Okay, so here's our application. Now, as you can see here, we have this your logo here. So let's say you're trying to add authentication to your application. If you scroll down to, let's see, login customization, here's where you can upload a logo. You can change your header. You know, you can edit the tab name. Let's say you want to say sign in or whatever, right? You can change the footnote. You can change all this stuff. And it has web and mobile. Make it look pretty snazzy. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to enter in, remember that user that we created? So I have my test user, password, sign in. And we are logged in. So this is, you know, this is just a basic web app. But as you can see here, we logged in. We have our greeting here. Okay, we can log out. Click on login again. Here we go. I'm going to log in with Google. Oh no! Yes, not match the ones off of. Let's see what happened. 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 Let's see Something's wrong with my.
Oh yeah, US East appid.cloud.ibm.com. That looks right.
Yeah. So,
And that's what it was complaining about. Or wait, that's the JavaScript origin.
oh, it wants the redirect URI. Update the authorized redirect URI.
So maybe you have to set that to the same thing.
Yeah, let's try that.
Oh, I mean
Oh.
to the JavaScripts.
It's so weird. All right, let's try this. Oh.
I think you missed a digit at the end of the URL. I think there's an 8.
At the end of this?
Yeah.
An 8?
Yeah. So then you just copy and paste that into your URL.
This?
Yeah.
I
double check that in the. Yeah, there you go. But do you need to be in the policy troubleshooter? Can you just go to it?
I don't know why it took me there. Let me go back here. Okay. There it is. Okay. Yeah. So you mean add this to the?
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Should we try this again?
Fingers crossed.
All right. All right. Okay. All right, everybody. Oh.
Still doesn't like us.
Yeah. What in the world? Callback does not match the authorized for the. Okay. Let me see. Auth client. The redirect URI in the request does not match the ones authorized for the OAuth client. So, oops. Oh, it wants the
full URI.
Maybe.
Cool. Sounds reasonable.
Could totally be just making all this up right now. We'll see. Yay!
Yay!
Okay. Yay. Okay. So let me.
So everyone pay attention so you can see Jenna's password. No, I'm just
kidding.
That's one of the nice things about Google Authentication.
Right.
So we have successfully logged in. And when I say we, I mean Jenna.
Yay. I'm working on updating a repo with some stuff. So stay tuned. But you have the blog post, you have the slides. There is an in-process repo. But hey, we just added Cloud Directory and Google Authentication to our App ID application that we have deployed as a web microservice, cloud native microservice application. So we have our backend, we have our backend for front end, we have our microservice. We have our resource microservice, and then we have our UI, all deployed to our OpenShift cluster. We have our authentication. Let's log out so we can see how pretty it looks. Ooh. And let me see, let me just go to, can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
I know
Sometimes
we're pretty over on time, so maybe we should wrap up.
Yes. So I'd like to invite you all to take a very, very, very quick 2-question, doesn't ask for any personal information survey. I just posted it in the chat. And if you would like to stay connected with us, I'm gonna post that in the, there we go. There we go. I'm gonna post this in the chat too. All right, so feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. You can check out more content on our IBM Developer YouTube channels. Let's see, what do we have? What else do we have here? Oh, if you would like to do more labs, let's say you'll have access to this cluster for the next, what is it, 24 or 48 hours, Dave?
Yeah, we say for the duration of the lab, but realistically, it probably won't be deprovisioned until sometime tomorrow. So
yeah,
lucky you.
Yeah, so lucky you. So you have access to a free cluster. After that, if you want to play around with OpenShift, do some of the labs, you can do that at on our IBM Cloud, on our Open Labs site. It's our Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud Open Labs. So there's a bunch of different labs here, and it provisions a cluster for you within a containerized lab environment. And then when you complete it, it deprovisions everything. And then I have the event resources. I have some authentication resources if you want to learn a little bit more about how OAuth 2.0 works, OpenID Connect, JSON Web Tokens, Pixie. So these are all things that I have of how App ID is functioning in the slides with all these things, but we don't have time to go over all of it. Some App ID resources. So if you want to use the SDK, I have docs for that. And some cool cloud certifications. They're completely free, always. The certificate is free. It's not one of those do the thing and then you have to pay for a certificate. It's totally free. I've done a bunch of these and added them to my LinkedIn to, help with jobs and things like that. And feel free to connect with us on our IBM Developer Social. So we're just about everywhere at IBM Developer. And yeah, Dave, is there anything else you want to close us out here with?
Just wanted to say thank you, Jenna, for an awesome lab. Thank you, everybody, for the amazing questions and for raising your hand and making this interactive. We always love answering questions and interacting with people, so it doesn't just feel like we're talking into a WebEx void. So we definitely appreciate that. And have a good rest of your week and a really nice weekend.
Yeah. I'm going to take you out with some nice, smooth outro music. Take this with you into your weekend. All right. We'll see you guys next time. Woo!